Before you watch this video, make sure you've got your Bible, time to think, and time to pray it in at the end. What can you do when you cry out to God and either He doesn't answer, or if He does, He gives you an answer that you weren't expecting or simply just don't understand? Well, that's what happened to Habakkuk. And his response, well, he begins by remembering who God is, and that helped him to take God at His word and trust Him. Last time in chapter 1 of Habakkuk, we saw how Habakkuk the prophet really struggled with how wicked people in Israel were rejecting God and seemingly going unpunished. Graciously, God answered Habakkuk. He affirmed that the wicked were to be judged, but then God dropped the bombshell that He was going to use the least godly people on earth at that time, the Babylonians, to do it. Where is the justice in that? Okay, the wicked people in Israel might get what's coming to them, but what about the wickedness of the Babylonians? Well, we're going to pick things up at Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 12, where that very question is being asked. In this verse, Habakkuk appealed to God a second time, and he started by saying, "Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die." Habakkuk began by remembering who God is. He remembers that God is his God, that God is holy, and so always does what is right, and that God is bigger than life, the universe, and everything. God chose the evil Babylonians as His instrument for justice and judgment, and Habakkuk knew that this wasn't a random act. This wasn't survival of the fittest. This was God in control, directing what would happen and when. We see that Habakkuk knows this back in the second half of verse 12. He writes, "You, Lord, have appointed them," the Babylonians, "to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish." We see previously in chapter 1 how unexpected this answer would have been to Habakkuk. And yet here we see that his attitude was actually one of humble acceptance of what God had said to him. God had said that He was going to use the Babylonians to judge all the wickedness going on. And that wasn't an easy answer. But Habakkuk knew he could trust God with it. I dare say we will all have many questions we would love to ask God about what is happening in the world, especially at the moment with coronavirus. Perhaps some of those questions will be very personal and touch on issues that affect us and those we love very deeply. And even when coronavirus fades from the news, there might be other questions we'll have about what God is doing with something else that is difficult or troubling in the world. Whatever our questions may be, both now and in the future, we need to make sure we begin by remembering what we do know about God. That He is good, that He is perfect, and that He is much bigger than we can imagine, and more powerful than we could ever know. And yet His people, just like Habakkuk, can say that He is our God. And because of what He is like, we can trust Him, even when He is silent, and even when what He says and what He does doesn't sit comfortably with us, when we don't understand it. God is holy. He is perfect. And He is running the world perfectly, even though we can't always see it clearly. God's plans are wise and His word can be trusted. But hey, not even Habakkuk found that easy. I mean, if you take a look at verse 13 to 17, you'll see this. He says things like, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Habakkuk cuts straight to the heart of the problem. How can a good and holy God ignore the wickedness of the very people he was going to use to carry out his plans? Essentially, this is similar to the question we'll all ask at some point, especially in light of recent world events. How can a good and holy God allow, let alone use for his good purpose, evil and suffering? In the verses that follow, Habakkuk doesn't mince his words as he's talking to God. The Babylonians were conquering and destroying everyone and everything in their path without even a hint of mercy. How can God be okay with this? It's worth saying that it is okay for us to ask God questions like this. Loads of people throughout the Bible do the same thing too, and I've done it in my life as well. But notice how Habakkuk finishes his appeal to God. In chapter 2, verse 1, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he, that is God, will say to me and what answer I am to give, that is, give to the people, to this complaint. Habakkuk asks big questions of God, and he knows that God gives answers, so he waits. Describing himself like a watchman looking for a coming messenger, Habakkuk is prepared to wait. He knows that God gives answers, but he also knows that it will be in God's own time, in God's own way. I don't know what situations you may be facing. Many of us will be struggling with the coronavirus pandemic. We might be worrying about our health, our loved ones, our jobs, or maybe even our very way of life. And if you can remember life apart from the coronavirus, some of us may be struggling with other things too. You may be dealing with problems at school, college, or work. You may be having problems with your family at home. You may be dealing with pain caused by other illnesses, or even coping with a recent death. And as you cry out to God and search for answers, it may seem like the answers you are getting don't make sense and don't help much at all. Well, God is the God who gives answers, and his answers are always what we need to hear. God is also a just God, and he will make sure evil is dealt with. And he will do what is right. And so because of all of these things, God is the God who can be taken at his word and trusted, even when, especially when, the answers he gives are hard for us to understand or accept. But remember, that God is also the God who cares for his people. He listens to us and he speaks to us. He speaks words of truth, and he always speaks words in love. For Habakkuk, God spoke to him directly. To us, God speaks primarily and ultimately in the pages of the whole Bible. And it's in the Bible that God reveals his master plan to us. And it's there that we see God's greatest answer to every human problem, an answer that we'll see next time as we look further into chapter 2.